everyone, I'm Clare Davis and I am back with Mental Health Chats, and we are starting the series on eating disorders. So I would like to welcome Alex Cross. Hello Alex, how are you going?
Yeah, good. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you. And Alex is going to talk to us about living with bulimia eating disorder and orthorexia. So orthorexia, it's a term that a lot of people may not have heard of, Alex. Would you like to explain what it means?
Yeah, sure. And I think it's perfectly valid that a lot of people may not necessarily be familiar with the term, as it was one that I don't think I was actually familiar with until I really realized that I was showing virtually every single symptom of it. I mean, in its purest form, and if you just do an initial Google search on it, you'll see that orthorexia really relates to what's referred to as having an unhealthy obsession with clean eating, or an unhealthy obsession with eating well or eating perceived healthy foods.
That's really interesting because the term clean eating has become quite a term that a lot of people use when they're dieting. It's like, I'm clean eating, I'm clean eating. So it's an unhealthy obsession with it, which is really interesting.
Yeah, and I mean, clean eating it's a slightly ambiguous term anyway, because I don't think you can really say that certain foods are bad and certain foods are good, just because we all have our own personal preferences around diet, and it's not the easiest thing to do to define that for yourself. I mean, you can have a very rough idea of what you're eating in terms of whether it's good or whether it's bad, but to categorize a food as being good or bad versus whatever else you may be it's just too broad a conversation topic.
Very, very interesting. Thank you for that. So tell us your story, Alex.
Sure. So, I mean, my story goes quite far back, to be honest, and I've done a lot of personal development for myself over the years, and I've done a lot of, I've had therapy at various points in my life as well. So my journey in terms of self-discovery and dealing with, I suppose, what you would look at as body image issues and eating disorder related issues it's a fairly long one. But I was always aware when I was growing up that I was very introverted. I was always very aware that, well, I was talking about this the other day, in fact, when you're at school, when I went to an all-boys school, you almost have like a perceived pecking order, and you automatically kind of size up where you stand versus everybody else. And when you're at an all-boys school, as I was, it really tends to come down to how loud you are, how confident you are in terms of talking to girls, and how good you are at sport. And unfortunately, I wasn't good at any of those three things. So I kind of took this narrative about myself when I was growing up, really, that I was not really that popular. I wasn't really that enjoyable to be around. And I had quite a low perception of myself too. And it was one that I think was a real struggle to shake off. And I think, I talk about it a lot now in my work that I do as a coach. But for me, it was always, I knew there was something wrong with me on the inside. But rather than facing up to that at that point, I tried to fix it with an external factor. So for me at that point, it was, okay, so I'm not good at sport. Let's start going to the gym. I'm not confident. Let's start trying to become more confident by looking better. And it was a cycle that really started, I suppose, from the age of about 18 or 19 or so. And it kind of came in peaks, then it would go away again, then it would peak again. But the first time I ever made myself sick was around about the age of 21, so all the way back in 2010. And I can still remember it now because it was just it's a bizarre thing to think of me doing, especially in the context around it. But it came at a point when I had a girlfriend who I decided was just far too good for me. I decided she was way too many levels, just way, way, way too good for me. And I almost became obsessed with just trying to become better. And I think that that's a trap that probably a lot of people watching this will probably relate to too. It is almost a cycle of continually trying to better yourself. But I'd gone to a house party at my friend's house, and I'd said that I didn't want to drink because I suppose essentially I wanted to be healthy and I wanted to feel healthy. And when I was there, I'd been peer pressured and I let myself drink. And I just remember coming home and I felt so guilty that I had this mindset of, I need to get this alcohol out of my system. I need to get it out now. So I've got a sink in my parents' in my bedroom at my parents' house. And I just remember being on my knees, almost with two fingers down my throat, almost just trying to get the alcohol out, just telling myself that I needed to do it. And I look back at that and I just think, you know, why did I do that? Why did that seem a logical thing to do? But then when I think a little bit more about how the story progresses, and then I think of, there was a few other times that I did that and that related to similar types of, you know, perceptions around food or whatever. So there was a time when I'd gone to Thorpe Park and I'd eaten a lot of like 𝗵𝗵𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀 sweets. And I came home and I did the same thing because I made this correlation that this food is bad for you, get it out of your system as quick as possible.
Yeah.
And it took a long while to kind of legislate that that wasn't what I should be doing, and actually process that that wasn't what I should be doing. But the bulimia was there on and off for years. But I think what more took over was the unhealthy relationship with food. But I would also say more the unhealthy relationship that I had with calorie counting. So, I mean, I think we spoke about this when we had our call the other day, but I got very obsessed with, rather than having the guilt of eating bad foods, I went almost into this phase of trying to micromanage everything that I was eating. So I became very obsessed with my own body weight. So I used to take my body weight on the scale every single day. I'd have a calendar where I would then make a note of it, and then I'd calculate a weekly average. And then in conjunction with that as well, for the same period, and we're talking about a period of years here, I would track every single thing that I ate. And then I had a spreadsheet that I used to have at my old job where I'd log everything that I ate for the previous day. And then I'd calculate a weekly average, and then I would base what I was eating around what the scale would say. So if I was putting on weight, then I'd look at and I would look at the spreadsheet that I had with what I was eating, and I'd make adjustments based on that. But it was just such an unrewarding and unfulfilling way to live my life. It was just, you know, I remember going to friends' houses and they'd get takeaway, and I'd arrive with my Tupperware box with my lettuce and chicken in, and I'd be looking at their food and I'd be like, God, I'm so envious. I just want to eat what you're eating.
Really?
But I wouldn't let myself do it because I knew that I'd feel too guilty around it. Or occasionally I would let myself do it, eat, you know, have takeaway with them. But then I'd starve myself for 2 days after. So it was never really enjoyable. It was always just food was dictating everything that I was doing in my life completely.
So you've obviously come out the other side, which is fantastic, Alex. So tell us about your journey of recovery so that you can help other people. What tips would you give other people to recover for something like that?
I think, you know, this is a lot of the work that I do in coaching too, because I work with a lot of men that have had similar experiences. And I think one of the things, and my biggest takeaways, has really been that it's easier to say now, and it's certainly not something that I would have necessarily related to hugely at the time, but you have to come to a point where you realize that life is too short to do that, you know. And to get to that point, I had to have my own therapy. I had to have my own personal development work around it just to really identify what it was. But when I look at what was causing it versus what I was actually doing because of the cause, it's a disproportionate amount of effort to go to. And I think it's really about understanding who you are. It's about understanding where you've come from, and it's about understanding what values you've taken away from life. And I think for me, it was about looking at what my values actually were and realizing that the way I was behaving wasn't aligned with my values and who I actually was, and looking at how I could separate those. And I think the other thing too is really about finding other things in life that make you happy. And you know, at that particular moment in my life, it coincided with a lot of struggles that I was having at work. It coincided with not a bad relationship with my dad by any means, but it coincided with a relationship with my dad that had a lot of things that for me felt unsaid, unresolved. And I had as a result of feeling like that towards my dad, I had a very, I suppose what you'd think of, a very warped conception in my mind of what a man should be. And I think my route of trying to resolve that was to try and be the man myself. And you couple that with my, you know, my childhood insecurities. And then you look at what I'm going out into the world in terms of saying, like, I don't feel like my dad has passed on these values. And I'm kind of creating this fake parent in my mind and this fake dad in my mind who's telling me that I need to be doing all of these things and telling me that I need to behave or act in a certain way. And I think separating that and realizing that that wasn't who I was really powerful too. And then I think lastly, it's just about, for me, it really does come down to the relationship that you have with yourself. And it really comes down to, you know, I talk a lot with clients when I'm coaching. I talk a lot about what's the impact that you want to have, you know, when people think about you, or when people don't see you for a while, what do you want them to come away thinking of? And I look back and I think, you know, I don't want people to look back at me and think, oh yeah, Alex, he had a nice body. I'd much rather people look back at me and thought, oh, Alex lit up a room when he came in, or Alex was really funny, or Alex was really positive, or Alex brought this into my life, that into my life. And I think, you know, why, when we're capable of so much more, should we place so much emphasis into something that is as minuscule as looking as good as we can, because it doesn't shape and it doesn't really determine that much around our life.
That's a really good tip. All your tips are really good, but I just love that last one, because so often, especially with the media, with social media, and a lot of teenagers go through this, it's all about body, but really, what do we want the world to remember us by? Now, having a great body isn't the be all and end all.
Not at all. No, not at all. And I think, you know, I'm so hot on talking about eating disorders for men, because there's definitely a growing awareness of it, absolutely. But there is also a misconception, I think, for some people, that it's not really a real thing. I mean, that's certainly things that I experienced when I was younger, and I'd talk about it. You know, people would say, oh, you're a man, you know, you don't have that. Or people would say things to me like, you know, I like one of the things that people used to say, and I don't mean it to sound as conceited as it would do, but people say, oh, you're a good looking guy, you've got nothing to worry about. And it's like, you know, flattered that you may have that perception, or I'm flattered that that might be what you're saying as terms of thinking it's the right thing to say, but that doesn't make me feel any better. And I think, if anything, too, there is a trap that we all fall into, like you say, that stems from the media, but there's also this trap that the more we're rewarded for something, the more we think it's who we are. So if your life is about looking good and people acknowledge you for looking good, you become more trapped in that, and you think, okay, that's all I am, that's all I'm good for.
Yeah, very, very interesting. You've turned on a couple of light bulbs for me, actually, Alex. So that's absolutely brilliant. And we do need to be aware that, you know, men do suffer from eating disorders as well. There's just as much pressure for men. And, you know, there are lots of conditions around being obsessed with going to the gym, being obsessed with the shakes, only drinking the shakes, and all of these obsessions, and it happens for men as well as women. So thank you very much for sharing that with us. And I'm going to put your website, and you've also got a YouTube, haven't you?
Yeah, I do indeed. Yeah.
Brilliant. And it's lovely that you are coaching people to help other people, especially men, on this, Alex. So I'll put your website link on and your YouTube on, because I think it's very, very interesting. And we do also need to understand that personal development is so important. It's very,
yeah. Well, I mean, the coaching work that I do is around people, I suppose, developing themselves and being comfortable expressing themselves when they actually go out, you know, into the world. And that's across all aspects, all the way from their work life through to their dating life as well. So the coaching that I do is based around helping people get to that point and embrace themselves for perfections and their imperfections as well. And personal development underlines everything. It literally underlines everything that we do.
It does. So brilliant. Thank you so much for your insights, Alex. It's been a pleasure to have you here. And our next guest, we are continuing the topic of eating disorders. And we've got a young lady called 𝗁𝗵𝗲𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, who's actually written a book about her story. And she goes into a lot of schools to talk about anorexia recovery. So thank you, Alex. And I look forward to the next one with Hope.